So why are some parts of the world so much richer and more powerful than others? It's a huge question, right? Well, back in 1997, a biologist named Jared Diamond wrote a book called Guns, Germs and Steel that tried to answer exactly that. It won a Pulitzer Prize, became a massive bestseller, but it also kicked off a huge controversy that honestly is still going strong today.
All right, to really get into this, we need to start with a story from the book that sounds, well, it sounds impossible. Picture this. It's 1531. You've got this tiny group of Spanish adventurers, just 168 guys, deep in the heart of the massive, powerful Inca Empire in South America. What happens next is just mind-blowing, and it really sets the stage for Diamond's entire argument.
So here's the big puzzle. How on earth did 168 soldiers manage to defeat an empire of 80,000? I mean, think about it. On one side, you've got the Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro with his tiny band of men. And on the other side, the Inca Emperor Atahualpa, surrounded by a massive, battle-hardened army of 80,000 soldiers on his own turf. You'd think the outcome would be obvious, but what happened next just defies all logic.
Okay, let's just break down the matchup here, because on paper, it's just insane. The Spanish had steel swords, steel armor, and even some early guns. Now, those guns weren't super effective, but they were loud and terrifying. And this is a big one. They had horses. These giant, powerful animals that the Inca had literally never seen before. Meanwhile, the Inca army, all 80,000 of them, were fighting with weapons made of stone, bronze, and cloth. It was a massive technological mismatch. And the result? It was an absolute massacre. In just one day, Pizarro's tiny force killed around 7,000 Inca soldiers and captured the emperor himself. And the Spanish casualties? Zero. Not a single soldier lost. This wasn't just a battle, it was the complete decapitation of an empire in a matter of hours. So the real question isn't just how this happened, but why. This wasn't about being braver or having better tactics. No, there was a much, much deeper advantage at play here.
So, what was this hidden advantage? Well, according to Jared Diamond, if you want to find the answer, you have to stop looking at the people involved. He says forget about race, forget about intelligence, forget about culture. Instead, you have to look at the planet itself. His whole argument is that these huge gaps in power and technology we see throughout history, they all come down to the luck of the geographic draw. Diamond lays it out like a chain reaction, a series of dominoes. And the very first domino to fall? Agriculture. See, once you can farm and produce more food than you need to eat right away, everything changes. You get a food surplus. That surplus means you can support a bigger population that doesn't have to move around all the time. And if not everyone has to be a farmer, well, then you get specialists. You get soldiers, you get craftspeople, you get leaders. And those are the people who develop advanced technology like steel and guns and build complex societies.
But that just leads to the next big question, right? If farming is the secret sauce, why did it take off in some parts of the world and not others? Why did Eurasia get such a huge head start? Diamond's answer is kind of mind-blowing and surprisingly simple. He says it all comes down to the shape of the continents.
And you can see exactly what he means right here. Eurasia is long. It stretches from east to west. So a crop or a domesticated animal that started out in the Fertile Crescent could easily spread all the way to Europe or China, because it's all at roughly the same latitude, with similar climates and day lengths. Now look at the Americas or Africa. They're oriented north-south. So a crop that worked great in, say, Mexico would have to cross jungles and deserts to get to South America. The climate barriers were just huge. It made spreading those agricultural innovations incredibly slow and difficult. So, that geographic head start explains the guns and the steel. But Diamond argues that the deadliest weapon of all was completely invisible. It was the germs. You see, Eurasia had a ton of large animals that could be domesticated. Horses, cows, pigs, sheep, you name it. 13 of the world's 14 major ones, in fact. The Americas, they basically just had the llama. And living side by side with all those animals for thousands of years meant that Eurasians were constantly exposed to their diseases, which eventually became things like smallpox and measles. Over centuries, they built up a deadly resistance.
Okay, you can see why this theory is so appealing, right? It's this big, elegant idea that explains so much of world history. And importantly, it's a non-racist explanation for global inequality. It's a huge reason the book is so incredibly popular. But, and this is a huge but, most professional historians and anthropologists think this neat and tidy explanation is not just wrong, but also kind of dangerous.
So what's the big problem?
Well, the main criticism is a concept called environmental determinism. That's the idea that your physical environment, your geography, is the main thing that determines how your society develops. Critics say this is a massive oversimplification. It basically takes human choice, culture, and creativity right out of the equation. It's like saying where you're born is your destiny and nothing else matters.
Another huge knock against the book is that critics call it Eurocentric. So what does that actually mean? Well, there's this old joke that explains it perfectly.
So, the joke goes like this. A guy loses his keys in a dark alley, but he's looking for them under a streetlight a block away. When someone asks why, he says, well, this is where the light is. For a long time, historians basically did the same thing. They tried to explain the entire world's history by only looking at European history, because that's where their light was. Critics say Diamond does this too. By asking the question, why did Europe conquer the world, he automatically puts Europe at the center of the story, making them the default, the standard that everyone else is measured against.
Okay, so if Diamond's geographic explanation is missing some big pieces of the puzzle, what are they? Well, the critics say to get the full picture, you have to focus on the things Diamond's theory kind of brushes past.
Now, Diamond talks about germs, for sure, but his critics say he doesn't truly capture the sheer scale of the devastation. I want you to just let this number sink in. 95%. That's the estimated death toll for the indigenous population of the Americas from diseases brought by Europeans. And here's the really crucial part. Most of this great dying happened before any large-scale conquest even began.
Think about what that means. It completely flips the script. The Spanish weren't toppling these massive empires at the height of their power. No, they were often walking into societies that had already been completely hollowed out by wave after wave of invisible plagues that spread way faster than the conquerors themselves. They were essentially invading a post-apocalyptic world, dealing with the traumatized survivors.
And this leads to another major problem critics have with the book. It tends to erase the agency of indigenous peoples. That's a fancy way of saying it treats them like passive victims, just waiting for geography to decide their fate. But that's not how it was at all. The Americas were filled with complex empires, alliances, and bitter rivalries. When Europeans showed up, they were just another player on the board. In fact, many native groups like the Tlaxcalcans actively allied with the Spanish to help bring down their own rivals, the Aztecs. They were making strategic choices for their own reasons.
So we're left with this fascinating paradox, right? You've got a book that is beloved by millions, a huge bestseller, and at the same time, it's pretty much rejected by the very experts who've dedicated their lives to studying these topics. So with all these big, serious flaws, why do we still talk about guns, germs, and steel all the time?
Well, it really comes down to this. The book is popular because it gives us one big, simple, and satisfying answer to a massive question. Plus, it's a powerful argument against racist theories of superiority. It says, hey, it's not about race, it's about geography. On the flip side, the experts say it's too simple. It leaves out human agency, it's Eurocentric, and it just gets some of the facts wrong. It's the ultimate pop history book. It gets you excited about the topic, even if the specialists wish you'd started somewhere else. You know, maybe the book's greatest legacy isn't the answer it gives, but the question it asks. It got millions of people who'd never thought about it before to seriously consider the deep, historical roots of global inequality. It made us all step back and ask, why, on a planetary scale? And that, right there, is an incredibly powerful thing, even if the answer it provides is too simple.
So at the end of the day, this whole debate over guns, germs, and steel raises a really fundamental question for all of us. Can one big, grand theory ever really explain all of human history? Or is history just messier than that? A combination of geography, culture, chance, and individual choices, all tangled together. Maybe the biggest takeaway is this. Be skeptical of any single theory that claims to have all the answers, because it probably doesn't.